STAR questions, best answers. So you might have heard of these. These are questions that they will ask you in a job interview, and they're very trendy. They've been very trendy for the last 30 years in the world of job interviewing. Are these things called behavioral questions. And these are questions where they ask you to tell a personal story from your background. So they'll say, tell me about a time, you solved a problem, or tell me about a time you dealt with a difficult coworker. Any of those questions to start with, tell me about a time. Those are all behavioral questions. Everybody is going to have a different answer to these questions because everyone will have different experiences, right? So those are called behavioral questions. And the generally accepted way that you answer those is in something called the STAR format. So sometimes people call these STAR questions. And STAR is an acronym. It stands for Situation, Task, Action, Result. And that's just the format that you give your answer in. And if you do it in that format, it really helps you make a nice, compact answer that gives the recruiter exactly what they're looking for, and it prevents you from rambling on too long. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. So we talked about behavioral questions. What I would recommend for everyone is, let's say you're going for a job. I don't know if I can do this in ChatGPT. I probably could. Let's say you're going for a job as a customer service rep or a project manager. You can go to Google and do this, but wherever, just Google behavioral interview questions, and then what was the job title? Project manager. Oops, I can't see my keyboard because my microphone's in the way. Project manager. Now, what I suspect you're going to get back is you're going to get an infinite number of possible questions. Okay. Here we go. So it's I guess it's breaking it out by category. But the point is, there's an almost infinite number of possible behavioral questions for any given position, right? And hopefully this should convince you that it's a losing strategy to try and memorize answers for individual questions, because there's an infinite number of these questions, and they can get quite involved. They could say, tell me about a time that you dealt with a belligerent coworker where violence in the workplace might have been, an issue, and you handled it poorly, but have since learned how to handle it correctly. Tell me about a story. Tell me about a time where that happened to you, right? So you see, by making the question longer, I can make it so that I can ask you an original question that you've never prepared for quite easily, right? So the way you pass these questions is you don't just memorize canned answers to them. You will never be able to do that. There's too many questions you'd have to prepare for. Okay. Now it's given you, here in this, it's given you what, 25 questions or 21 questions, something like that. Can you describe a situation where a project was at risk? What did you do to get it back on track? Right? There's an example of a behavioral question for a project manager type role. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you that you can't just simply memorize an answer and that's how you address these. So you need to come prepared for any possible behavioral question that they could ask you. Okay, and that's what we're going to do. Now, let me explain something. There's a principle that recruiters are taught to believe, and that is that past behavior predicts future behavior. So if you were put in a certain situation in the past and you handled it a certain way, if you were to encounter that exact situation in the future again, you would behave the same way you did in the past, right? You handled it one way in the past, so you're going to handle it that way again, right? So this is the principle that recruiters are taught is 100% true. So when they ask you a question from your past, tell me about a time you did this, they don't really care what you did in the past. They're trying to assess, if we hire you and we put you in this situation, how are you going to behave? Are you going to know how to handle it properly? Or are you going to do the wrong thing? Right? That's what these questions are for. It's questions about the future. So make sure that whatever answer you give, if you're telling a story about how you handled something, make sure that it's the way you would handle it again. It's the right way to handle it. Okay? Don't tell a story about how you handled it and it turned out to not be the best way to handle something, right? Okay? So that's the point I want to make, even though they're asking you about the past. Okay, recruiters believe this principle. They believe that past behavior always predicts future behavior. We all know, I think, that that's not necessarily true. People grow, people change, people learn. You start out by messing up. You gradually learn the right way to handle things, and then you end up doing it the right way later on, for sure. Right? Okay? Now, here's how you prepare for these types of questions. STAR questions or behavioral questions. You're going to do some preparation. Prepare, this is what I'd recommend. Prepare 5 success stories. Okay, so these are your most shining moments, your biggest wins in your work life, okay, like on the job. These are your biggest wins. And then prepare 5 other stories that are, failures or other things, okay? And so that's basically 10 stories. Vet these stories. Make sure that, they're the right way to handle it, and that you would do it again. And practice saying them in a compact format, usually the STAR format, STAR, situation, task, action, result. We'll get into that in a second, okay? Exactly what that is. So you practice these. Then the idea is that when you go down to the job interview, any behavioral question they could possibly ask you, okay, including like some of these like crazy things that you could never possibly anticipate, any question that they ask you, you're going to pull out one of these 10 stories, and you're going to use this story as your answer. You might have to tweak it a little bit depending on precisely what they asked you, but you're basically going to pull out one of these 10 stories. These 10 stories have been vetted, they've been rehearsed, they're right on the forefront of your mind, the tip of your mind, and you're ready to go. And that's how you handle these. Now, as I said, 5 of these stories that you prepare for should be your 5 most shining moments on the job. You did something, you were tasked with something, you did it, you did a great job, you were commended for it, and you were promoted because of it. That would be a good story to tell, right? Okay. So 5 stories kind of like that, your biggest wins. And then the other 5 are going to be other things. Now, what other things should you prepare for? This is what I'd recommend. A good sort of cross-section of these type of topics would be good. Okay, times you failed with work or with deadlines, with expectations, or you failed with a communication, or you failed at time management. Okay? Other things like you're under stress, a story where you were under stress, a story where you had to deal with change, a story where you had to smooth over someone who's upset, right? Those would be good if you have any of those. Stories that you have that showed, your ability to persuade people. You did some persuasion, or you did a presentation, or you showed creativity. Those would be candidates of stories to prepare for. Okay? Things like that. Those are things that I would recommend. Okay? Now, you're going to practice saying these answers, not just in a long, rambling stream of consciousness, kind of like what I'm doing, because I haven't prepared for this very well, but you're going to practice them in saying them in a very compact format. STAR, situation, task, action, result. So situation, just you basically say what job you were in, what was your role. Task, what you had to do. Okay, so situation, task, action, what you did. and then R, result, how it turned out. Okay, so situation, task, action, result. So let's do like, I don't know, I'll pick one of these questions here. How about, I don't know, this. What does this say? Tell me about a time when a major change occurred during a project. How did you handle it? Now let's pretend that I prepared an answer, okay? One of my 10 stories would probably go as follows. Okay, they're asking about a major change in a project. Major change in a project. Okay, so my answer might be something along the lines of, well, about 2 years ago, I was working as a project manager. That's the situation. And I had to complete a construction project on deadline, and it was very tight because we had problems with our contractors. That's the task. So here's what I did. There was a new, I guess I have to talk about change. So there was a new system that was coming out about how we had to communicate with our contractors. This was very new. It was company policy that we had to follow it. And, I had to conform to these rules, but the problem was it was very cumbersome. So what I did is I arranged a face-to-face meeting with the head contractor, with the boss, and I went down and I spoke to them in person. We had a sit-down meeting, and I made it clear that here are my goals, and outside of achieving these goals, I'm prepared to be flexible. I'm prepared to work with you in whatever way you would like. If you can help me complete these goals, which is basically getting it done on time and on budget, if there's anything on my end that I can do that would help make your job easier, then, just let me know and we can hopefully make this work. So that was the action, STA, situation, task, action, and then the result. And what happened was we ended up completing the project in the nick of time. So we did meet our deadline, but in order to do that, the contractor had really opened up to me and given me a lot of their requirements that I was able to meet. And because I was able to help them work in the way that worked for them, they were able to deliver what they needed to deliver on time. And so as a result, we met our targets, and the project was completed on time and on budget. It's hard to make up a story on the spot, but you get the idea, something like that. Okay, so I'm giving an answer and I'm using this format. Now, the first two things, situation and task, are not really that important. They should be short. I was working here, this is what I had to do. Very short. You spend your time on the last two, A and R, action and result. Especially action. This is what I did. Okay? That's what the recruiter is most interested in hearing. What did you do? Here's what I did. And then the result, here's how it turned out. Okay, so the emphasis is on the last two. So sometimes people talk about the star format or the car format. There's all kinds of silly flavor of the month kind of stuff out there. But the point is that you tell the story in this format. It prevents you from rambling on for 10 minutes. It allows you to get to the point. It allows you to give them what they're looking for and keep you on task. Okay, that's the star format. Okay, sometimes people add another element on the end, learning. So it's star L, like situation, task, action, result, and then learning. You can do that. Some people don't, some people do. If they ask you about a failure, okay, and there's no way to really disguise the failure, they say, tell me about a time where you failed at interpersonal communication. Okay, it's pretty hard to get out of like talking about how you failed when they ask you a question like that. So a great way to answer that is to tack on the learning component right at the end. So you say, this is what I did. I was working as this. This is what we had to do. I had to communicate with this employee and give them their task. It did not go well. The employee got upset. They got belligerent. I noticed that they had anchor tattoos on their forearm like Popeye, which made me fearful of getting my ass kicked in front of all my employees. So it did not go well. I had to quickly back down and, whatever. And this was the result. So I did not handle it well. However, what I learned was in those situations, instead of taking the approach that I did, because I was young and I didn't really know, this is how you should handle it. You should make sure that you say this and you do this. And that way, you won't encounter that bad element. And instead, you'll get this good result. And that's what I have been doing ever since. So I know how to handle those type of situations. So you see, even though I'm talking about a failure and I'm telling a story about how I failed, I'm still showing that I've got a lot of value and you don't have to worry because I won't fail on the job if you hire me because I know what to do. I learned what to do and have been doing it ever since. Okay, so that can be the advantage of the star L format. So if I ask you about a failure or something like that that sounds bad, tack on the learning at the end, and then you put their mind at ease that, no, you will be able to handle those situations properly if they hire you. Okay, and as always, if you want to go deeper with this kind of stuff, check out my course, Get Hired course. There's a link in the description. All my advice in one place with templates and all the principles stacked on top of each other. It also goes into how to tap networking to get tremendous job opportunities. So check that out. Okay, that's what I have to say about that.